Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today coached NASA-level scientists for over a decade on their writing skills and edited books showing how many scientific facts support a creator. She's an award-winning freelance writer and editor and is the author of The Windblown Girl, a memoir about self, sexuality, and social issues. This inspiring page-turner involves an intense romance that starts on a Caribbean cruise and shows how that affair led her to exchange chaos and confusion for peace and stability. Her bi-weekly blog explores the topics of self, sexuality, and social issues. She's limboed in the Caribbean, gone on a king crab safari in the Arctic Circle, and saw Mount McKinley on a clear Alaskan day. She enjoys planting pansies, drought-tolerant gardening, and reading good books on the beach. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Patti Townley-Covert.
Well, thank you, Julia. Thank you so much for having me. And before we get going with the interview, I want to congratulate you on your new book. Let's see, I got to look at the name, The Fifth Daughter of Thorn Ranch. That just sounds like such a great book.
Thank you so much, Patti. It just came out last week, actually, November of 2022, for our listeners who are listening later. Patti, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, so what took you so long to write your first book?
Well, it's quite a journey. I wanted to be a writer from the time I was in first grade. That's when I wrote my first book. It was 13 pages. And my teacher told me then, you're going to be a writer someday. But as I grew and got interested in boys and didn't really care so much about school, I thought it would be way too hard for me to ever be a writer. I didn't think I could ever do it. But then I had this romance on a cruise ship that was such an incredible story that everyone that heard it well, the romance continues. It's actually throughout the book in various ways. And once people heard that, they said not only did it need to be a book, but it needed to be a movie. And I thought, gosh, my best friend said, if you'll go to a writer's conference, I'll send you. And so that started it. And when I got to the writer's conference, I had a book in mind, and they said, no, start small. So I started with inspirational pieces that got published right away. My very first one got published, and that was an encouragement. And then came a magazine article in Focus on the Family. Started the journey, and I wrote 3 full drafts of the romance over a period of about 20 years, but something was missing. And it wasn't until COVID and Afghanistan, and the withdrawal from Afghanistan and the civil unrest over George Floyd happened, that the pieces came into place. It just wasn't time. And in the meantime, I was learning my craft.
Well, that sounds like a great journey and a great way to get to where you needed to be. Writing memoir is difficult to put our lives down on paper for everyone to see.
It's true. That was one of the first things I learned at a writer's conference, is that if we're not willing to be vulnerable, then we can't write about ourselves. I'm so glad that I did put in the work so that I could figure out how to write.
I agree. I think on our first book. Sometimes we're learning the craft as we go, and that's why a lot of those first books end up in drawers, and never see the light of day. But if you put in the time and took those classes and wrote all those articles and became published in so many impressive magazines, I think that really did encourage you to complete the book.
It was really helpful. And two things that I learned at my first conference that I wanted to share with your listeners, because they are such a help for anyone who is writing, is there's two books that were recommended to me more than 30 years ago. They're still in print, and I read them several times. As an editor, I want all writers to know that these books will take your writing to the next level. I think I have the subtitle here if I can find it, but Writing for Story is enough probably. The other one is Make Every Word Count by Gary Provost. Those two books will really help writers understand the craft of telling a story and being concise, putting things in clear language that pops, that has some pizzazz to it.
Well, thank you for those recommendations. I love specifics that we can give to writers and recommendations that really help their work.
Yeah, I'll be happy to send you the links for those later on if you want them.
Once you wrote this book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to choose a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
Well, I wrote a book proposal, which is really important for agents. And I approached agents both that would represent Christian publishers, and I approached secular agents. And both, I sent it to probably 50 different agents. I had already worked with two publishers and had really good relationships with them. But because I didn't have the platform of about 10,000 followers, I'm not real great at marketing. And because the story is a mix of inspirational, really my spiritual journey, as well as this illicit affair and how those collide, nobody thought they could sell it. And it's interesting because it's selling fairly well. So I self-published. I had enough of a background and enough contacts. And then there was something else I thought would be helpful to the listeners, is there's a podcast called Novel Marketing Podcast by Thomas Umstattd Jr. And that was incredibly, it still is incredibly helpful to me. In fact, he had a course about being on podcasts. He has courses, he had a book launch blueprint course, which was the best money I've ever spent on anything related to my writing, because it walks you through the steps of building a website, of starting an e-newsletter. In fact, if people go to my website, they can sign up for my e-newsletter, and that's been very successful. People seem to really enjoy it because I like to write letters, and that's all it is. And it's only once a month, so I'm not flooding people's inboxes. So that's really been a helpful tool to me.
Well, that's great, because that's one of our questions is always, what do you think was the best money you've ever spent as a writer? So you've already answered that for us.
Well, I probably got ahead of myself, but when something impacts your work as much as that impacted mine, I just want to shout it from the rooftops. He's a marketing guru, unlike anybody I've ever seen. He covers all the bases. He does it in a clear, methodical way that's easy to follow. And I'm just very grateful for the input that's brought into my life that's enabled me to self-publish. It enabled me to learn how to manage a website, which saved me hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And I actually built my website myself. And it won, my blog web page won an award with Evangelical Press. So that was very, very cool.
Well, that's high praise for that publication and for his training.
It really is, because I had no clue. I'm not tech savvy. I'm still not tech savvy. There's a few little glitches. If somebody goes to my website on their cell phone that they might see, I need to pay somebody to fix them because I don't have any idea how. But the one that comes up on the computer works fine.
Well, Patti, do you have a writing routine every day? Do you write in the morning or at night? How do you do your writing?
Well, for years, I was up at 5 o'clock every morning, and mornings were my most productive time. Now it seems to be later in the day. Now that I'm trying to do more marketing, I procrastinate more. It's hard for me. It's really a challenge. And just for your listeners' sake, one of the things that I've learned is that podcasts are the best way to market your books. I'm finding out that blogs are not as, don't garner the attention that podcasts do. So I'm grateful for what you're doing. I think Authors Over 50 is just a wonderful podcast to help those of us who are trying to gain visibility and trying to learn how to do it. We can learn from each other.
I think that's true. And the reason that I started the podcast is because I couldn't find enough podcasts for my own benefit, to tout my own books, because there's so many for under 30 or under 40, as I say in the intro, but they're not a lot for us over 50. So I'm trying to pay it forward, because our writing community is such a generous community, and everyone reaches out and helps each other. And just like you were making the recommendations for things that work for you, I have found that in our writing community. And I think that's very different from other occupations and corporations and things that I've been involved with in the past.
Well, readers love to read, and so they need lots of books. And I think we all know as writers how much we need to help one another. We can't do it by ourselves. It takes a team. And that's where I love being part of a team. It's really fun to interact with others. And in that respect, I do have another tip that might be helpful to your listeners. And that is to be really open to feedback, critical feedback. When I was writing magazine articles, I learned, I had an editor that mentored me. He was with a major publishing house, and he'd send me a letter giving me feedback, and I'd sit down and cry. And then I would go to work and try and fix the problems. And my ex-husband, one of the things that I missed the most when he left was he would critique me very harshly. And I think, no, that's not true. But then I would think, no, something needs fixing. And so one of the most valuable pieces of advice that I can give, and this is as an editor, I give this advice all the time, is to be really open, even when feedback feels brutal. I tell people, give me brutal feedback. You don't mince words. Tell me exactly what you think. And that's really a gift. It's an absolute gift that I treasure, because that allows me to improve my work.
I think that's so true. When I go to book clubs, a lot of times they're hesitant to give an honest review of the book with the author sitting there. So I always tell them, I grow more from what you didn't like about the book than what you did like about the book.
It's true. A book club did my book. It has discussion questions in it, but those were a result of going to a friend. A friend had the book for her book club, and they were so hard on me that I joined the club. I thought, these are women I want to be around. And it's important as we write to be thinking, how can our work influence the readers? Really, the story that I wrote is not about me. It's about issues that are very common in our world today. The lack of intimacy with young people and the problems that they're having because of cheap sex, and the narcissism that has been cultivated by the media, that it's all about you, and the social justice movement that really creates more injustice. And to get to write about those things from life experience as a story has been just a great privilege and honor. So readers were first and foremost in my mind as I wrote the book. And that's why, that goes back to why did it take me so long?
Well, those are such significant topics in today's society. So thank you for writing about those. They're very difficult to write about, but they're so important.
They really are. You know, my blog stemmed from, I did a ton of research before writing my book. And then I wrote the book with bringing the research in, and it didn't work. It just ruined the story. And so I had to take it all back out. And that was another draft. And so I started the blog, and it doesn't have nearly the reach that I wish it did, because it is important concepts that people need to realize, even if they don't want so much the spiritual aspect. We all have a worldview, and it comes from somewhere, and Hollywood's worldview is broken. And so the more we apply these timeless truths, and our country used to do that. You can see that in the Declaration of Independence, where all men are created equal. And that's why I talk about a creator, because if we were created, then we have a basis for equality, where without that, if it's evolution, it's survival of the fittest. And that leads in places we don't want to go. So these timeless truths are really important. And the research was not just all from a spiritual aspect, it was from a very secular aspect, and bringing that in. The point that I'm trying to make is that by writing the blog, then I can talk about it. If I didn't write my blog, and the blog is for readers, but at the same time, it's for me, because by writing about it, I process my thoughts. And that's why, as writers, I would encourage all writers to rewrite and rewrite, because the more you rewrite, the more you refine your message.
I think that message is your platform now. And I think your memoir becomes your calling card. And so you're able to discuss all of those significant issues with both of those.
It's true. I've gotten much better about talking about it. And one of the marketing tips I can throw out there is the calling card that is most effective for me and easiest for me to give out is a bookmark, because the bookmark promotes my book. It gives a little taste of what is important about the cultural issues and exchanging cultural lies for timeless truths. So that's become a really effective, the most effective marketing tool that I have.
Well, Patti, you are an editor. How does editing your own work? Because I'd like to know that, because I can edit your work very well and see every typo you've got in that manuscript, but I can't do my own because I can't see it. I've skimmed over it so many times, and all of those repeated words I've got, I'll miss those every time. So I have to have an outside editor. So how do you work your editing process?
Well, I kind of cheated. And I would just encourage everyone to understand that if you self-publish, you need editors. I've edited a couple of books for free because of the fact that people were taken to the cleaners by editors that didn't know what they were doing. And I knew who I wanted to use as a developmental editor. But as the process took so many years, it took over 3 decades. I knew that the first half of the book was really clean. The first half is about escaping the pain. It really delves into the romance on the cruise ship. I had to write with metaphors so that I could go into the sexuality part without being graphic. So it's a very clean book, but I knew I had taken so much time to write it, and that I could be objective about looking at it. The second half wasn't so easy, and I really fully intended to use this developmental editor, and it took long enough after I wrote it that it got cold, and leaving something set for several months and then coming back to it, I can be very objective. I've had to be that way in my life in order to survive. There's more complications in the book than a illicit affair. My dad was MIA in Vietnam, and that's a part of the story. And these things had gone on for so many years, so that by the time I did the final edits, I thought, he might improve it some, but I don't know that he'd improve it a lot. I have my best friend, is an editor of doctoral dissertations. She read through it twice and gave me feedback. I have another friend who is so nitpicky that she read it. I think she read it 3 times. She gave me excellent feedback, and part of that was developmental. She could catch problems. And normally I'd say don't use your friends, because most of the time they will not give you honest feedback. They will tell you it's great when it's not. I know, because I've taken a lot of those clients that I think, oh my goodness, they really need the work. And then of course, copy editing and proofreading are 2 other phases of editing that are so crucial. And again, because, well, I did send it out to proofreaders. I think I had 3 proofreaders that went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and I put all their corrections in. My designer is excellent at proofreading, so he caught things. And then I reread the book. After all that, I reread it, I think, at least 3 times with my eagle eye. And I was really pleased, because I have friends that are editors at top organizations. And one guy read it and he said, I only found 2 mistakes. And I couldn't believe it. I was thrilled that in the whole book, there were only 2 errors, and they've been fixed since. And I didn't even recognize them. I had to look them up, because he caught things that I didn't even know. So, it does take going through it and going through it.
A village. It takes a village to get these books to print.
It really does. I would say I had probably 3 or 4 editors. They just wouldn't say that they were. One of them would, but the others might not.
Well, Patti, why don't you read from your book for us so that we can hear your tone and voice?
Okay, well, we've already said it's set on a cruise. The thrilling part, and it has components throughout the book, was that at 24 years old, I was on a Caribbean cruise with my mother. I was in a miserable marriage, and my dad was missing. I was pretty miserable. And I met a Norwegian navigator he was really handsome, charming. I knew he was an international playboy, but I'd been accused of being frigid and a prude. Even my mom told me I was a prude. And it was in the days when if it feels good, do it was the mantra. And so I'm on this cruise, I'm in this affair, and my husband called. And it was a very awkward, hard phone call. And he wanted to know if I wanted him to leave. I didn't say anything about what was going on. So that sets the stage After that phone call, I went out on the deck of the ship. The Norwegian navigator was at work, and I was all alone out under the stars. And that's where I'll start reading.
Okay.
Wanting to be alone, I went downstairs, pushed open a heavy door, and stepped outside into the oppressive evening air. Finding an isolated spot by the pool, I perched on the edge of a chaise lounge and rubbed my throbbing temples. What am I going to do? How can I possibly make my marriage work? And what about Jan? This was the decade of me. I had abandoned all the rules to learn about myself. With no responsibilities, I thought I could be whoever I wanted for 2 full weeks. Despite knowing that the sensations of lovemaking, intimacy, and respectful interactions could only be temporary, I'd taken that risk thinking no one outside this oceanic realm would ever know. But how could I possibly put Jan in the past? Though it was clear I must not fall in love, I was crazy about him. Yet those emotions couldn't be any more than temporary. If he knew how I felt, the relationship would be over. I simply must not, could not fall in love. And what about the family I longed for? He was not an option. Jan's highest priorities involved his career and seeking pleasure. Mine were diametrically opposed. Stability with a family and conventional routines. He loved his glacial homeland. I loved Southern California's warmth. He constantly made new friends and went on adventures in exotic locations. He spent vacations in Spain with his best friend. All I wanted was security, a home, and a husband who would come home at night and be there for me and my son. This cruise had put me on board my own personal Titanic, an emotional ship destined to sink. My mind and body had connected in ways I'd never before experienced. Yet that problem seemed mine alone. Others had casual sex. Why couldn't I? At least this time, my feelings weren't wrecking the relationship. Although I had a hard time not revealing how much I adored Jan, knowing our relationship couldn't continue made me seem as elusive as he was. Craving a life with someone like him was out of the question. But how could I live without him? The muggy night silence wrapped me in a thick blanket of despair. Knowing what was at stake, I leaned back to look up at the turbulent storm clouds with glimpses of the moon peeking through. A gentle breeze parted them enough to reveal patches of a night sky spangled with the brilliance of diamonds, tossed on a black velvet jeweler's cloth. It would take someone big enough to hang those stars in the sky to fix this mess. Right, I laughed ruefully. Even if such a creator existed, why would he help someone like me? I left my little boy to go on a Caribbean cruise, cheated on my husband. Worst of all, I didn't even feel guilty. And I was crazy about a man I must not fall in love with. This situation was beyond any power I had to control it.
Wow.
My life was a mess.
That was a very difficult time.
It was, and the difficulties only got harder. That romance, as illicit as it was, changed my life. I wanted stability. I wanted a family more than anything in the world, which was what I told my husband when he called, that I didn't want him to leave. I really wanted our marriage to work, but it was a mess. And we didn't have the tools. So, there was this drama that creates good stories. And I had to get to the place where I could be vulnerable enough about my failures and my bad choices. And it doesn't paint a pretty picture of me. And I think as we start writing, we want to paint that pretty picture that I did all these things right. I tell people the thing I'm best at is failing. I've failed at a lot of different things. But that part of the story that's so miraculous is that looking up at the sky, at the stars in the sky and thinking about a creator. And then here, years later, I work with scientists who show how a creator hung the stars in the sky. So there's interweavings in the book that I couldn't have made them up if I tried.
It really is part of the miracle.
Yeah, it was, looking back, I'm glad I don't have to relive it. And when I write, of course, writers know this, when you write, you have to relive. And sometimes that's really hard.
It really is. I think that's why memoir is so difficult. You're spreading your entire life open for everyone to see.
It's true. And one of the things that I learned at that early writers conference, I went to many, I probably went close to a dozen because they were so helpful. But one of the things that I heard was, if you have issues in your life and you want to write about them, you better get the help you need, because it will show. And I've edited enough books to know that sometimes, in fact, I had a gal who had written a book and there was a lot of codependence issues that she never addressed. And I don't think she understood the issue of codependency. And before she could publish her book, she had to come to an understanding of how that played into her story, which she did. And now it's marvelous. And someday she'll probably be on your podcast.
Well, they say that writing these books, especially memoirs, are like going through therapy. So I think that's all part of it.
I think that's true. You know, many of us keep journals, and that's very helpful. It's cathartic. It helps you see what you've gone through and address it in a private way so that you can figure out how to address it in a public way.
Well, Patti, do you have any other books in you?
I hope so. I would really like to write the counterpart to my romance. And I think we'll see. We'll see. I also would like to write a book called The Windblown Parent. And there's so many parents that need help withstanding the life storms with our kids. In fact, this book has been a good one. The Windblown Girl is a good one for parents and grandparents who want to relate to young people today, because it shows what the pressures are. It shows what the dilemmas are that seem okay, that end up with broken hearts and broken lives. And so, yeah, and right now I'm working on a booklet. We'll see. I'm working on a booklet about how to withstand life's fierce storms.
Well, I think you're exactly right. Our parents today are certainly immersed in those storms, and there are a lot of them.
It's true. My heart just aches. I know what I've been through as a parent. It's not been easy.
No.
And I have friends that have gone through other variations of the same storms. And in fact, one of them is somebody who read the book in an early form, and it helped him come out of a big depression, because he realized that there was more to the storm than what he understood. So, yeah, we need all the help we can get.
At every stage of life.
That's right. That's absolutely true.
Well, as always, our very last interview question is, our writers over 50 are a unique set. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
I do. I'm really happy to share what I learned years ago from a Writer's Digest article about the writing life after 40. And this is even more true after 50. We have much more to share. We have a stronger foundation to bring forth what we want to say. In that article, it talked about not rushing things. That's another marketing thing that has been a big encouragement to me. I delayed my book for almost 2 years so that I could get the marketing platform in place before I brought it out. And so I would say, if you're over 50, don't worry about going fast. Worry about doing all you can to make your book everything you want it to be. And don't feel the pressure to be somebody you're not. I'm not a great marketer. There's things I like to do, things I love talking about it. That's really fun for me. So this is a really great setting. But there's some people that don't want to be on social media, don't want to write a blog, don't want to do a newsletter. There are things you can do. And I had one client who was over 50, and he invested the money to produce a really good book because he said that was the greatest legacy he could leave for his children. So kind of determine why you're writing and then go for it with all your heart. We live long enough now, we can start a new career at 50. And that's, I started freelancing at 60. More that was after working with a scientist that I became a freelancer, and that led to the book. So there's twists and turns, and because we're over 50 doesn't mean we're over the hill. It's a new stage of life, and it's a good one.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's D-A-I-L-Y, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.